So today we're going to talk about covetous relationships within idolatry. And we're going to start off in Colossians 3 verse 5. Colossians 3:5, there's one verse there, but it's going to be the premises and the basis of what we teach for the next few weeks outside of Sukkot. Therefore, put to death your members. We're not going to be doing this right now. We're not going to be doing this, which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. And this is where we're going to focus the sermon today, is on covetousness. Now, a lot of people are going to think, don't covet the neighbor's boat, don't covet the car, don't covet this. Ever watch Family Feud? Wrong. That's not what we're talking about. We're looking at this through relationships, covetous, idolatrous relationships, not adulterous relationships, as in being in a relationship with God and, committing adultery with other gods, but as a covetous, idolatrous relationship, as being in relationship with God and committing adultery with other gods. Same, one and the same. But as we go through this and as we walk through this, I want to focus on something at the beginning of it, and that's about veils. Veils. See, there's a veil of reality that needs to be removed, because we've got to be able to walk into the presence of the Father. Relationships again. You see, mankind has all kinds of veils, and we've used man-made veils to keep people from truths. And we could go through the whole list of it, whether it be the media. There's all kinds of veils that are put up to keep us from the truth of what's really going on. You can look at things in social media, and there's all kinds of veils that people put up that don't bring out the truth. And, there's veils now that are being put up about basic things like, where do babies come from? And kids, if you don't know where babies come from, please go ask your parents. Don't call the office, and they'll explain it to you. But then we can also look at it from a religious perspective, a religious sects, and that is biblical teachings. We could look at it from weak and watered down definitions of sin. We can look at it from people that push sin to the limit, or push the truth, push things to the limit, and right on that cusp of it turning into sin. Why do we even go that far with some things before we back off? Why do we push God? Why do we tempt God with it? But this is where we just need to back off and make sure that we have our relationship with the Father pure and holy, with the veil completely removed. See, a veil. What is a veil? A veil refers to a curtain or some type of a cover that intercepts the view of an object. A woman wears a veil when she's getting married, and it intercepts that view until it's removed. And we're going to go through a few verses here. But you look at Moses. Moses veiled his face when leaving the presence of God and when he was speaking with the people. Exodus 34, 34, and 35. But whenever Moses went before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And he would come out and speak to the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, then Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went to speak to him. Intercepting. What was it going on there? He was intercepting the presence of God. Intercepting. We look at another type of intercepting the presence of God. We look at the temple curtain. See, the curtain that separated the holy place from the most holy place. And again, intercepted the presence of God. Why? So the people wouldn't perish because of the sin that they had. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 4. Another type of veil. Every man who prays or prophesies wearing something down over his head brings shame to his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head unveiled brings shame to her head. There is no difference between her and a woman who has had her head shaved. And that's why you see us wearing these little buckets on our heads. See, what it was talking about here, you get into different translations. This was the clearest one that I could bring forward. But it talks about veiling there. And men shouldn't be veiling their faces, is what the whole thing is referring to. It talks about don't cover your head is the way it's been taken. It's about veiling yourself, guys. And this isn't a veil. This is a command. You see, did God initially intend for any type of separation? Did God ever intend for sin in the garden, which created the initial separation? Did he intend to put a veil at the temple? At the entrance of the garden? Did he ever intend to veil that so nobody could find it? Let me ask you this question. Did God initially intend for a temple at all? If we were still in the garden, would there have been a need for any of that? Genesis 3:24, so when he drove the man, he placed the cherubim at the east of the garden and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Why? So we couldn't screw up again. Guarding. Putting up that curtain, putting up that veil, blocking it off so we can't get into that. You see, God's intention from the beginning was not to in any way guard the way to the tree of life. His purest intention for us was for man and for woman to live in the garden amongst the tree of life. They walked in it. They spent time with the Father. There was no veil. They had the pureness of it. But what the Father wanted, He only wanted us to know the good, His good. And what they did in there is they brought forth and they partook, and we were what? You'll be like gods. You'll know good and evil. He only wanted the best for us. You see, Adam and Eve, they opened up the evil. Opened up the eyes to that realm, to that side, and it broke the intended relationship. It broke that, what? Through covetousness, through idolatry, that relationship. And God had to put up veils after veil after veil to protect us once again. You see, the only way for that was to stay out of a covetous relationship. And that's what we've all got to get to. Covetousness, again, stems from what? Through idolatry. Idolatry. And it's running rampant all through society, and it's running rampant all through the church. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Now, we said about relationships, and we're going to focus on relationships as we talk about this today. Because all human interactive problems that we face, whether it be in marriage, whether it be in family, whether it be with your children, whether it be just basic friendships, what about neighbors? What about colleagues at work? Kids, if you're in school, you have classmates. It could be relationships with your classmates. You see, all problems in those areas are all rooted in various forms of idolatry. By wanting things other than God in wrong ways. In wrong ways. Is there anything wrong with wanting some certain things? No, there's nothing wrong with wanting certain things. But wanting things other than God in wrong ways. You see, covetous means desiring something other than God in a wrong way. So let's define. What's that mean? What are we talking about in a wrong way? In a wrong way. We've got to do things according to the Word and only according to the Word. Desiring the Father. Desiring Him in His ways. According to His Word. Not according to my feelings. Not according to your feelings. He's not the feelings police. We're not the feelings police. We are the Word police. We're to guard the Word and make sure the Word and the Word only gets within our lives. You see, but the problem with that covetousness, within idolatry, it's not just a matter of ignorance. The problem with it is our attitude. It's the problem of the human attitude towards God. And that's what was going on back in the garden. Their attitude towards the Father. See, what it comes down to is the attitude of fallen man. The attitude of fallen man. The ignorance of it. Refusing to honor the Father. And this is what this whole thing comes out to. Honor your father and your mother. Well, that parallels right into the Father above. Honor Him. Honor Him with your words. Honor Him with your praise and worship. And stay within that realm. But this is about driving every element of fallen man out of our lives. Driving every element out of our relationship to each other. Driving every element of fallen man out of the relationship with the Father. What are the two great commands? Love the Lord thy God. Love the brother, love your sister. Love yourself. Getting everything back in right standing. Getting away from that fallen attitude of dishonoring. You know, we can look at certain things through covetousness, but it absolutely destroys every type of relationship, including your relationship with the Father, people. But when we get into things, other aspects of it, I'm just going to touch on this briefly and then move on from it. What about our personal enjoyment? See, enjoyment can become covetousness. It can be idolatrous. When it starts to draw us away from our duties. When we find ourselves spending time pursuing our enjoyments more than pursuing the things of the Father. Pursuing our own enjoyments or pursuing the things that we want to do, knowing that other things that are other people should be getting our attention. When we start to identify those paths where it starts to maybe lean that way, look out for idolatry. And why am I bringing this up? Because Jesus Christ Himself warned us about idolatry coming back around over and over and over. It's all the way through Scripture. Covetousness. Out of the Strong's Concordance, I'm going to use one word out of it. Fraudulency. Anything that has a type of covetousness in it is a fraudulent relationship. And that's why I bring this up so adamantly and so heavily. Because the last thing we want to do is stand before the Lord thy God one day and Him say, what? We have a fraudulent relationship here. We've got time right now to fix these things while we walk the face of this earth. Well, we get ourselves back from the ways of fallen man and back in absolute right standing. But when we get into our enjoyment, anything that draws us away from our duties, from what we're supposed to, what we're obligated to. And you can go through a whole list of things that you're obligated to do for the Father. Prayer, keep Sabbaths, whatever it be, whatever you want to call it. There are all kinds of commandments in there. Are we all perfect? No, we're not all perfect. But if it creeps in, it makes our relationship with God fraudulent. And if it creeps in, it makes our relationship with our neighbor, our brother and sister fraudulent. Again, love your neighbor, love the Lord thy God. Love. Love. Therefore, if covetousness comes in, it has replaced love. And that's a big thing, because now what? You're not loving God. You're not loving your brother or sister. You're not being Torah observant. And if you're not being Torah observant, listen to this one. You're actually considered to be walking in blasphemy. Because not obeying Torah was taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain, and exactly what Jesus stood for. It's taking Torah in vain, the Word in vain, the living Word, the written Word. Again, it destroys your relationship with the Father. And now you can see it destroys the relationship with the Son. And it goes one step further even now, and it destroys the relationship with the Holy Ghost. Why? Through blasphemy. It can walk you right into that if you're not careful with it. All based out of what? Idolatry starting to break down. This is the veil of reality. And that's the line that came to me this week. The veil of reality. And we've got to sit down and we've got to take our time. And that's the premises even of examining ourselves. We could do this every day. And look. You see, God wants you to make one step of progress this week. One step. Whatever it be. Move forward towards Him. Drive something out of your life. Let's go to Joshua 24:3. Joshua 24:3. And I took your father Abraham from beyond the Euphrates River, and I led him through all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his offspring. I gave him Isaac. And I gave to Isaac Jacob and Esau. And I gave to Esau the hill country of Seir to possess. But Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in the midst of it. And afterward I brought you out. I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea. And the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. When they cried to the Lord, He put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and He brought the sea upon them and covered them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt, and you lived in the wilderness a long time, 40 years. I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I gave them into your hand, and you possessed their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and warred against Israel, and called Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore he blessed you, so I delivered you out of Balak's hand. Covering, yeah, he covered us. He also covered them in the Red Sea. He also separated so that we could see, and they were in dark. The veil. We can walk in the light. If we pull these things down, we have the opportunity for the miraculous here. You can see it, watch it, live it. And this is where we've got to get to, because we're going to rely on the exact same things that are being talked about here in the end times. But you would not listen to Balaam, therefore he blessed you, so I delivered you out of Balak's hand. I got a caution all the way through here. Caution on the ways of Balaam. They're going to arise once again. Caution on down onto the watering down ways of our ancestors and the things that they had to go through. Caution on things like Gnostic teachings that bring in other influences. Caution on finding new ways to access God. For they are what? They're fraudulent. Caution on to the soothsayers. Because they're going to what? Continue to conjure up lies in the name of God. Fraudulent. Caution to the gods of Moab. Fraudulent gods. Some of them are going to do exploits, but our God's going to reign. We're going to reign with them. Caution to the church who preaches again Gnostic views. And the big one, caution to the people speaking against the law. I caution you, and you better examine your beliefs, because everything is turned into complacency, complacent messages. Love, love, peace, peace. Roses and tulips. They speak peace when there is no peace, it says. We're walking into a point in time where the veil's being put up. We're being blinded from everyday truths on what the agendas are. We know what God's is. It's about His way. It's about you walking in it, me walking in it, living it, eating it, breathing it, applying it. It's not about being a hearer, it's about the doer. You're not going to be judged on what you necessarily just hear. You're going to be judged on what you did and how you applied it to your life. You see, but we go through this stuff with Balaam. Because when Balaam could not successfully curse the people of God, what did he do? He used another method to try and destroy them. He got into things like seduction, caution on seducing spirits. That's why I brought up about what? The soothsayers. Seducing them into unbridled, sensual living, dangling out the prostitutes of Moab before the men of Israel. And what'd they do? Oh, you can ask me after. That terminology. They fell for it. We'll just put it that way. And then Israel began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. Why? Because it created a replacement relationship, a fraudulent relationship with others. And where else do we see that? Well, that's not too hard to find. Flip over to 1 Kings 11:1. 11:1 and 11:2. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, the Edomites, the Sidonians, and the Hittites. They were of the very nations of whom the Lord said to the Israelites, "You shall not mingle with them, neither shall they mingle with you, for surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods." Yet Solomon clung to these in love. Fraudulent love. Fraudulent relationships. And what did it do? It absolutely destroyed Solomon. See that he then partakes of the women. He partakes of the spiritual ways. He partakes of the spiritual word of other gods. He ended up committing spiritual fornication with other gods. Right back to the Garden of Eden. Flirting with other gods, and it destroyed the relationship. You see, when we don't care if the act is making us holy or not, and people just get complacent with things, you could be moving into idolatry. Idolatry. You see, on the contrary, what about us? What about this? Well, they're not getting it done. What about delights in religious things? Delights in things like prayer? Is there anything wrong with that? No. Bible reading? Is there anything wrong with that? No. Ministry? Delighting in the ministry within your life? No. It's a wonderful thing to be able to enjoy the holy things of God. But it's idolatrous to feel proud that we can while others cannot. That's where you cross the line. That's where you step over. That's where you could be the only sin in a situation. It's the small things that we're starting to prune out of our lives. Revelation 2 verse 14. Nevertheless, I have a few things against you. You have some people who hold on to the teachings of Balaam and who taught Balak and set a trap for the people of Israel so that they would eat food that had been sacrificed to idols and committed sexual sins. Eat food that has been sacrificed to idols. I'm sure you could walk through your grocery store and you could find food that has been sacrificed to idols. Revelation 2 verse 15. Likewise, you have too many people who hold to the teachings of the Nicolaitans. A caution on the way of the Nicolaitans. A caution on that. I'm not going to get into the whole thing. I taught that before. We could go back and do that again if you'd like. You see, but nobody sins out of duty. Nobody feels obligated to sin. We get drawn into those things. We get seduced. We get pulled into it. Through what? Enjoyments? Pleasure? Be cautious when pleasure rolls into idolatry? Could it be that you want to sit around and watch TV when you should be studying? Is it the fact that you're sitting playing video games, as an example? Well, you should be doing the things of God. When you should be looking out for your brothers and your sisters, or strengthening your relationship with the Father. What is it? You've got to live, you've got to eat, you've got to breathe this. That's what you're going to stand before God. He's going to ask you, did you live it? Did you breathe it? Did you eat it? Did you search for me like fine silver and fine gold? Did you try to get to the treasures that are written in my word? The richness of it, the beauty of it, the holiness of it. Psalm 119:33. Psalm 119:33. Teach me, O Lord, the ways of your statutes, and I shall keep it to the end. Give me understanding, and I shall keep your law. Indeed, I shall observe it with my whole heart. Make me walk in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. Psalm 119:36. Incline my heart to your testimonies, and not to covetousness. You see, the writer here, which is like 95% probable of David, King David, but it's not confirmed. But there's a lot of things in here that lead towards it. Still looking at it, looking at covetousness. Make sure that it doesn't go that way. Incline my heart to your testimonies and not to covetousness. Turn away my eyes from looking at worthless things. And revive me in your ways. Establish your word to your servant who is devoted to fearing you. You see, we look at things like worthless things. Where do we spend time on worthless things? And when do those worthless things that we spend our time on seduce us to keep continuing going into something that really doesn't matter in the eyes of God? What are they? You could come up with your own list. I can come up with a list of them. Again, people can get caught up in social media. You can get caught up in anything. People get addicted to their phone, sit there, scroll. People get addicted to, again, video games, television, mindless things. Is there anything wrong with those things? No, not if they're utilized properly. But we have to guard against the seduction that draws us into those things, which pushes those things into idolatry. It's always going to be there. When Christ warns us, we better pay attention. When the Father is looking at things and saying, watch out for covetousness, we see David guarding himself here against covetousness. We've all got to be so astute towards it because it can creep in. It can absolutely creep in. I'm going to jump here for a second. I'm going to go to Enoch 60, verse 6 and 7. But when the day and the power and the punishment and the judgment come, which the Lord of the spirits has prepared for those who bow down to the judgment of justice, and for those who deny the judgment of justice, and for those who take his name in vain, that day has been prepared a covenant for the chosen and a test for the sinners. And on that day, 2 monsters will be distributed, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the deep of the sea over the fountains of the waters. It talks about there, for those who take his name in vain. That's where we opened with this whole thing. Taking his name in vain. And when you start taking his name in vain with things, God said this, God said that, or you've made an idol out of this, or you've gotten into this, God here uses the things that they worship, the things that you worship, and turns it as a weapon against them. Am I saying that's going to happen to you? No, you've got an opportunity to walk away from whatever it is you got to. And maybe you already have, and that's fantastic too. But you're going to have to teach others to do the same thing. But what's going on out here in this world? What are the gods that are rising up? I don't care if it's the plagues and all those plagues had a god associated with it. He used the plagues, the things that they were worshiping, that they were tied to. They worshiped frogs. They worshiped all these things. Locusts. And he weaponized it against them. He beat the gods, their worship, with their own gods. Caution. 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 How we apply worthless things today. Proverbs 28, verse 16, as we wrap up here. A ruler who lacks understanding is a great oppressor, but he who hates covetousness will prolong his days. Will prolong his days. So when there's covetousness there, their days are shortened. And there's a lot of people around the face of this earth that are going to have their days shortened. There's a lot of people, a lot of politicians that are having their days shortened, even in the country that we live and walk in here. Days shortened. Why? Because they're veiling from the truth. They've gotten into the things of covetousness. Proverbs 28:17. A man burdened with the bloodshed will flee into a pit. Let no one help him. Whoever walks blamelessly will be saved, but he who is persevere in his ways will suddenly fall. Jump over to Luke 12, verse 13, and you got the parable of the rich fool. Still can't get away from those parables, can we? Then one from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to you, Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness. Covetousness. For one's life does not consist of the abundance of the things he possesses. So what's he talking about here? Let's go back. Then one from the crowd said, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Tell my brother. He's talking about relationships here. Man, who made me judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness. Don't destroy relationships over what? Stuff. Junk. Things that you can't take over to the other side. The things that you're not going to stand before God about. Don't worry about those things. You know, there's a saying, you come into this world naked and you leave the same way. You're not going to stand before the Lord thy God with your, whatever you want to call it, your riches. Does God want you broke, poor, and depressed? Absolutely not. He wants to show and have you shine on the face of the earth. But that's a warning there from Christ himself about it. It has everything to do with relationships. It has everything to do with the relationship with the Father, everything to do with your spiritual brothers and your spiritual sisters. 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 4. But as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts. For neither at the time did we use flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness. God is witness. Even when they were bringing it forward, nor a cloak for covetousness, nor did we seek glory from men. Can that turn into covetousness? Absolutely it can. Seeking glory, either from you or from others, when we might have made demands as apostles of Christ. They weren't seeking glory. What they were concerned about was just absolutely doing the Word of God the way that they were taught by Christ himself, who walked the face of the earth with them. And all they were trying to do is bring that forward. Let's wrap up here with Hebrews 13, verse 5 through 8. Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear that I can do to me. What can man do to me? I'm going to repeat that. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Remember those who rule over you, who have spoken the word of God to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The spirits of God are the same yesterday, today, and forever. And the spirits of darkness are the same yesterday, today, and forever. Just coming back with a little bit of lipstick on the pig. Be cautious. Be cautious about covetous relationships within idolatry. Raise up the veil and look at the reality. And walk in the ways of the Father. Let's close.